They say that only two certainties in life are death and taxes. But there's a third one that historians are sure of. England is going to lose a war over an insignificant barren rock somewhere in the ocean. Now it might be the Falkland Islands, a windswept archipelago off the coast of Argentina. Or it might be the Faroe Islands, a cluster of volcanic rocks between Scotland and Iceland. Or it might be this, a tiny spit of land that juts out of the Red Sea and has no permanent residence. Yes, I'm talking about the war between England and Argentina over the Falkland Islands in 1982, which I've already covered in a video on my other channel. So why am I covering it again here? Well, because I can talk about how England lost the war without spoiling anything for those who have watched my other video. And also because this war was weird. It was weird how it started with Argentina invading the Falklands on April 2nd, 1982. That's right, not the other way around. Most invasions are meant to be a surprise, but this one was blared across the world's newswires, because Argentina gave the world a 24-hour heads up before they took over the islands. It was weird how the British government under Margaret Thatcher didn't do anything for the first week. They just talked about it, a lot. It was weird how the Royal Navy had to sail all the way from Britain to the South Atlantic, taking 78 days to get there. It was also weird how after weeks of fighting, the British retook the islands only to hand them back to Argentina 2 weeks later. Hold on, rewind. Did I just contradict myself? Yes, I did. That's because none of those things happened. The war was fought over these islands, the Falkland Islands, which today have a population of around 3,000 people, and whose claim to fame is being the inspiration for an Elton John song. For centuries, the islands were a stopover point for whalers and sealers, but no country laid claim to them until Britain did, in 1833, when they landed a few soldiers there and raised the Union Jack. Argentina protested, pointing out that they had actually spotted the islands first, but Britain told them to shove it and kept the islands. Argentina never quite accepted this and periodically threatened to take them back. But the British were prepared for any invasion attempt, or at least they were in 1982 when the topic of the Falklands came up during the annual British cabinet reshuffle. That's right, the war started because of a cabinet reshuffle. You see, Margaret Thatcher decided to fire her defense minister, a man by the name of John Knott. This was a mistake. Knott had been fired once before, but Thatcher brought him back because he was good at his job, and she needed someone to blame when the inevitable war with Argentina kicked off. Thing is, Thatcher didn't want to start a war with Argentina, but Argentina's dictator wanted to start a war with England. The problem was, he needed a distraction from his own country's problems. In 1982, Argentina was in an economic slump. Inflation was around 3,000%, and people were getting poorer. And while the junta's top brass was looking for a way out of this quagmire, they got the perfect idea. They would start a war and then win it, proving once and for all that their country was strong. So on April 2nd, 1982, they invaded the Falkland Islands. Now, this wasn't going to be easy. Although the islands were a British overseas territory, they weren't exactly defended. There was one small research base with a handful of Navy personnel and a couple hundred locals who volunteered to help defend the islands if necessary. But the junta had a plan for them too. They would offer the islanders a deal. Surrender the islands peacefully, and we won't hurt you. The British government had to scramble to figure out what to do. They could have just ignored the invasion, but that would have looked bad. They could have sent in the Royal Navy to fight the Argentines, but that would have been more difficult than it was worth. So they opted for something else. They did nothing. Seriously. For the next week, Thatcher and her ministers argued about what to do. Some wanted to invade immediately. Others wanted to wait until the Navy was ready. Still, others thought the whole thing wasn't worth fighting over. Eventually, Thatcher decided to go for it. But she didn't tell anyone, not even her cabinet. She just went ahead and ordered the Royal Navy to retake the islands. This was a mistake. Good decisions are rarely made during cabinet reshuffles. Bad decisions are never made when everyone thinks you're about to invade another country. Worse decisions are made when your entire military is on the other side of the world trying to get home after a long deployment. Worse decisions are made when your entire military is on the other side of the world trying to get home after a long deployment, and you have to send them halfway around the world again to fight a war that nobody really wanted. But that's what happened here. In hindsight, it's pretty obvious that this was a bad idea. The Falklands were remote, and defending them would be costly. The Royal Navy would have to sail over 8,000 miles through some of the worst weather on Earth just to get there. But these weren't the thoughts of men. These were the thoughts of a woman, and Thatcher was neither. She charged ahead anyway. And if you want to hear about how the British eventually retook the islands, and how they were basically lucky that the Argentines weren't very good at war, well, you'll just have to watch my other video. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go put some more work into that video now.